The plastic shovel fell from 8-year-old Marcus's trembling hands, clattering against the wet sand, as two uniformed officers approached his family's beach blanket. His younger sister, Zoe's sandcastle, carefully constructed over the past hour with turrets and moats, stood abandoned as tears streamed down her cheeks. The sound of approaching sirens had already sent other beachgoers scrambling to pack their belongings. But the Williams family remained frozen in place, their perfect Saturday afternoon dissolving into a nightmare they never could have imagined. "Sir, we need you to gather your belongings and leave the premises immediately," Officer Rodriguez said, his hand resting uncomfortably on his radio. Behind him, his partner, Officer Chen, shifted nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding before them. The beach stretched endlessly in both directions, dotted with families enjoying the unseasonably warm October weekend. Yet somehow, only the Williams family had been singled out for removal. David Williams looked up from where he'd been helping his son dig a tunnel connecting two sandcastles, salt water and disbelief stinging his eyes. "I'm sorry, officers, but there must be some mistake. We have a valid membership here. We've been coming to Ocean View Beach for 3 years." He reached toward their beach bag, where their membership cards were stored alongside sunscreen and snacks. But Officer Rodriguez immediately stiffened. "Keep your hands where I can see them, sir," Rodriguez commanded, his voice carrying across the sand and causing nearby families to stop their activities and stare. The afternoon sun, which had felt so welcoming just moments before, now seemed harsh and exposing. Sarah Williams instinctively pulled her children closer, her heart pounding as she watched her husband's face cycle through confusion, frustration, and a familiar weariness that came from experiences like this. Just 20 minutes earlier, the Williams family had been the picture of contentment. David had been teaching Marcus how to body surf in the gentle waves, while Sarah helped 3-year-old Zoe collect shells along the shoreline. The beach had been their sanctuary, a place where the stresses of David's demanding job as a software engineer and Sarah's work as a pediatric nurse seemed to melt away with each crash of the waves. They had discovered Ocean View Beach 3 summers ago and immediately purchased a family membership, drawn by its clean facilities, life-guarded swimming area, and welcoming community atmosphere. The trouble had started when Karen Hutchinson, a woman in her 50s, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and an expensive beach cover-up, had approached their spot near the volleyball courts. Sarah had noticed her earlier, holding court with a group of other women near the snack bar, their conversation punctuated by pointed glances in various directions. But Sarah had been too focused on applying sunscreen to Zoe's shoulders to pay much attention to the brewing storm. "Excuse me," Karen had said, her voice carrying the particular tone that David and Sarah had learned to recognize over the years, a combination of false politeness and barely concealed hostility. "I don't believe you're supposed to be here. This is a private beach for members only." She stood with her hands on her hips, designer sunglasses perched atop her head, making no effort to lower her voice despite the children playing nearby. Sarah had looked up from where she was helping Zoe rinse sand from a particularly beautiful shell. "We are members. We've had our membership for 3 years now." She had tried to keep her voice level and friendly, hoping to diffuse whatever misunderstanding was occurring. "Our kids love it here. They've made so many friends." But Karen's expression had only hardened. "I've been a member here for 15 years. And I know every family that belongs to this beach. You people don't belong here." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Sarah felt her stomach drop as she realized this wasn't going to be resolved with simple conversation. Marcus had stopped building his sand tunnel and was now watching the exchange with wide, worried eyes. David had approached then, sensing the tension even from his position, helping Marcus with the sandcastle. "Ma'am, I assure you we have every right to be here." Would you like to see our membership cards? He had reached toward their bag, but Karen had stepped back dramatically, as if he were threatening her. "Don't you dare raise your voice to me," Karen had shouted, though David's tone had been nothing but respectful. "I'm calling security right now. This is harassment." She had pulled out her phone with theatrical flair, making sure everyone within earshot could witness her supposed distress. Several other beachgoers had begun to gather, some looking concerned, others simply curious about the commotion. Now, as the police officers stood over their family like storm clouds blocking out the sun, Sarah felt a familiar rage building in her chest. She had experienced moments like this before: the assumption of guilt, the burden of proving their right to exist in spaces that others took for granted. But never in front of her children. Never with such public humiliation, and never at a place that had felt like their safe haven. "Officers, we can show you our membership documentation right now," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "We pay annual fees just like everyone else here. Our children have swimming lessons here every Tuesday evening." She gestured toward Marcus and Zoe, who were now clinging to each other beside their elaborate sand creation, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. Officer Chen, the younger of the two, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The complaint we received suggested that you might be trespassing on private property. We're just following up on the call." His eyes darted between the family and the growing crowd of onlookers, clearly aware that the situation was escalating beyond a simple administrative matter. "Who made this complaint?" David asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Karen Hutchinson stood about 50 feet away, surrounded by her group of friends, watching the proceedings with obvious satisfaction. She had positioned herself perfectly to observe while maintaining plausible distance from the confrontation she had orchestrated. "We can't disclose that information, sir," Officer Rodriguez replied, though his gaze inadvertently shifted in Karen's direction. "Right now, we need to see proof of your authorization to be on this beach, or we'll have to ask you to leave." The absurdity of the situation struck Sarah like a physical blow. Here they were, on a beach they had visited dozens of times, surrounded by families they recognized from previous visits, being treated like criminals because one woman had decided they didn't belong. Marcus tugged at her beach cover-up with a small, scared voice. "Mommy, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" The question pierced through Sarah's composure like a knife. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes adults make unfair assumptions based on the color of your skin? How do you maintain their innocence while preparing them for a world that might not always welcome them with open arms? "No, baby, we didn't do anything wrong," Sarah said, kneeling down to Marcus's eye level while keeping one arm around Zoe. "Sometimes there are misunderstandings, but Daddy and I are going to fix this." She looked up at the officers with renewed determination. "Our membership cards are in our beach bag. May I retrieve them?" David slowly reached into their bag and pulled out 2 laminated cards, each bearing the Ocean View Beach logo and their family photo from when they had first joined 3 years ago. Marcus had been missing his 2 front teeth in the picture, and Zoe had been barely more than a toddler. The cards clearly showed their names, membership numbers, and expiration date of December 2024. Officer Chen examined the cards carefully, comparing the photos to the family before him. "These appear to be legitimate," he told his partner in a low voice. But Officer Rodriguez seemed reluctant to back down from the confrontation that had already drawn such public attention. "Anyone can fake membership cards these days," Rodriguez said dismissively. "We're going to need additional verification. Do you have proof of residence in the qualifying municipalities?" He had pulled out a small notebook and was now treating the family like suspects in a criminal investigation, rather than paying members enjoying a day at the beach. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle. Sarah noticed several familiar faces among the onlookers, including the Morrison family, whose children had played with Marcus and Zoe during previous visits. She saw recognition and discomfort in their expressions, but no one stepped forward to vouch for them. "This is ridiculous," David said, his professional demeanor finally cracking under the strain of the situation. "We live in Millbrook. I'm a senior software engineer at Dataflow Technologies. My wife is a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. We're not criminals trying to sneak onto your beach." The desperation in his voice was audible, and Sarah felt her heart breaking for her husband, who had worked so hard to build a stable, respectable life for their family, only to have it questioned and diminished in front of their children and neighbors. Zoe had begun to cry softly, overwhelmed by the tension and confusion swirling around her. "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down," Officer Rodriguez said, his hand moving to his belt in a gesture that sent a chill through every parent watching. "We're conducting a lawful investigation based on a complaint of trespassing. Your cooperation is required." It was then that Jennifer Morrison, a mother of two who had exchanged pleasantries with Sarah on several previous occasions, finally found her voice. "Officers, I've seen this family here many times before. Their children play with mine. They're definitely members." Her intervention seemed to break a spell, and suddenly other voices joined in. "Yeah, I recognize them too," called out Tom Bradley, an elderly man who often brought his grandchildren to the beach. "The little girl there helped my grandson find his lost beach ball just last week." More voices added their confirmation, creating a chorus of support that seemed to catch Officer Rodriguez off guard. But Karen Hutchinson was not finished with her performance. She pushed through the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard and believed. "Officers, don't let them manipulate you with their sob story. I've been watching them all afternoon, and their behavior has been suspicious from the start. They're probably casing the area for future break-ins." The accusation was so outrageous, so clearly rooted in prejudice rather than any observable reality, that it seemed to hang in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt her professional composure, honed through years of dealing with difficult parents and medical emergencies, finally reaching its breaking point. "Ma'am, we've done nothing but enjoy a peaceful day at the beach with our children," Sarah said, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. "We've harmed no one, threatened no one, and bothered no one until you decided to make us your target. What exactly about our behavior has been suspicious? Playing with our children, reading a book, eating sandwiches." Karen's face flushed red at being challenged so directly. "Your tone is exactly what I'm talking about. Aggressive and confrontational. This is a family beach, and we don't need that kind of element here." She turned to the officers with dramatic urgency. "Are you going to let them continue threatening me?" Officer Rodriguez, perhaps influenced by Karen's theatrical performance, or simply eager to resolve the situation quickly, made a decision that would haunt him in the days to come. "That's enough. We're going to need you to pack up your belongings and leave the beach while we sort this out. You can contact the beach administration on Monday to resolve any membership issues." The injustice of it hit the Williams family like a physical blow. They were being forced to leave their rightful place based on nothing more than one person's prejudice and false accusations. Marcus looked up at his father with confusion and hurt. "Daddy, why do we have to go? We didn't finish our castle." David knelt beside his son, struggling to find words that would explain the inexplicable without crushing the boy's faith in fairness and justice. "Sometimes, son, there are misunderstandings that take time to fix. But we're going to make sure this gets resolved." His voice carried a promise that went far beyond the immediate situation. As the family began to pack their belongings under the watchful eyes of the police officers, Sarah noticed that several other families were also preparing to leave in solidarity. Jennifer Morrison approached her quietly. "Sarah, this is absolutely wrong. We're leaving too, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happened here today." The walk to their car felt endless, each step across the sand heavy with humiliation and anger. Zoe cried openly now, not understanding why their perfect day had been ruined, while Marcus trudged silently beside his parents, his small shoulders carrying a burden no child should have to bear. Other families watched their procession with a mixture of sympathy, discomfort, and shame. Karen Hutchinson watched their departure with obvious satisfaction, already turning back to her friends with what was surely the beginning of a self-congratulatory narrative about how she had protected the beach from undesirable elements. But her triumph would be shorter-lived than she could have imagined. That evening, as the Williams family sat around their dinner table, trying to process the day's events, Jennifer Morrison was making phone calls. Her first call was to Rebecca Chen, the president of the Ocean View Beach Community Association, and, coincidentally, Officer Chen's aunt. The second call was to Maria Santos, a local reporter who had been covering issues of racial discrimination in suburban communities. "Rebecca, you need to know what happened at the beach today," Jennifer said, her voice tight with anger. A family was forced to leave by police because Karen Hutchinson decided they didn't belong there, despite having valid memberships. It was absolutely shameful. Rebecca Chen had served as the Community Association president for 6 years and had worked hard to make Ocean View Beach a welcoming place for all member families. The idea that someone would be harassed and removed based on prejudice, rather than any legitimate concern, made her stomach turn. "Tell me everything, Jennifer. Don't leave out any details." As Jennifer recounted the afternoon's events, Rebecca was already pulling up the beach's membership database on her laptop. The Williams family's information was immediately accessible, showing not only their current membership status, but also their history of community involvement. David Williams had volunteered for the annual beach cleanup 3 years running. Sarah Williams had donated her nursing services during the children's swimming program when one of the instructors had been injured. "This is going to be front-page news by tomorrow," Rebecca told Jennifer grimly. "And it should be." What happened today was not just wrong. It was illegal. They were discriminated against in violation of every principle our community claims to uphold. Meanwhile, Maria Santos was already crafting her article, having interviewed not only Jennifer Morrison, but also Tom Bradley and 3 other witnesses to the incident. The story that emerged was damning in its clarity, a textbook case of racial profiling that had played out in full view of dozens of community members. By Sunday morning, the story had exploded across social media and local news outlets. The headline read, "Family with valid beach membership forced to leave by police after false trespassing complaint." The article included quotes from multiple witnesses, photos of the Williams family's membership cards, and a particularly damaging quote from Karen Hutchinson herself, who had apparently been unaware that Maria Santos was a reporter when she had bragged about her successful effort to clean up the beach. "I don't care if they had membership cards," Karen had told Maria, believing she was speaking to another concerned parent. "Some people just don't belong in certain places, and it's up to those of us who've been here longer to maintain standards. I did what I had to do to protect our community." The quote, when published alongside the family's spotless membership record and community service history, created a firestorm of outrage that extended far beyond the local community. By Monday morning, the story had been picked up by regional news networks, and by Tuesday, it was trending on social media platforms across the country. David Williams was at work, trying to focus on a software deployment project, when his phone began buzzing with messages from friends and colleagues who had seen the news coverage. Sarah was at the hospital, attempting to concentrate on her young patients. When the hospital's media relations department approached her about requests for interviews from national news organizations, the attention was overwhelming and largely unwanted. They had not sought to become the face of a civil rights struggle. They had simply wanted to enjoy a day at the beach with their children. But as the story gained momentum, they realized they had an opportunity to ensure that what had happened to them might not happen to another family. Rebecca Chen called them personally on Tuesday afternoon. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I want to apologize on behalf of our entire community association. What happened to your family was absolutely unacceptable, and we're taking immediate action to ensure it never happens again." The community association's response was swift and comprehensive. An emergency board meeting was called for Wednesday evening, and Karen Hutchinson was formally notified that her membership was under review. The police department launched an internal investigation into the officers' handling of the incident, and the beach implemented new policies requiring staff training on anti-discrimination practices. But Karen Hutchinson was not going quietly. She hired a lawyer and began making appearances on conservative talk radio shows, portraying herself as the victim of political correctness and media bias. "I was simply trying to protect our community from people who seemed out of place," she insisted during one particularly inflammatory interview. "Now I'm being persecuted for caring about property values and safety." Her media campaign only served to generate more outrage and support for the Williams family. Community members who had remained silent during the original incident now felt compelled to speak out. The Wednesday evening board meeting, originally planned for the community center's small conference room, had to be moved to the local high school auditorium to accommodate the crowd. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity, with families of all backgrounds united in their condemnation of what had occurred. Rebecca Chen opened the meeting with a clear statement: "We are here tonight because our community failed one of our member families. We allowed prejudice and discrimination to masquerade as legitimate concern, and we must ensure it never happens again." One by one, community members took the podium to share their own experiences and express their support for the Williams family. Jennifer Morrison spoke about the courage it took to speak up in the moment. Tom Bradley talked about the importance of teaching children to recognize and oppose injustice. Even some of Karen's former friends distanced themselves from her actions, expressing shock at behavior they claimed to have never witnessed before. Karen Hutchinson sat in the front row with her lawyer, her face growing redder with each speaker. When given the opportunity to address the community, she rose with defiant anger. "You're all acting like I committed some terrible crime. I made a simple complaint about people I didn't recognize. How was I supposed to know they were members?" The auditorium erupted in angry murmurs at her continued refusal to acknowledge the racial nature of her assumptions. Sarah Williams, who had been listening quietly with her family in the middle section, finally stood to respond. "Mrs. Hutchinson, you didn't just fail to recognize us. You made a deliberate choice to assume we didn't belong based on nothing more than how we looked. You escalated the situation by calling the police instead of simply asking to see our membership cards. And when presented with evidence that we were legitimate members, you doubled down by making accusations about our character and behavior." Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being listened to in high-pressure situations, and the auditorium fell completely silent. "My children asked me that day why we had to leave when we hadn't done anything wrong. I told them that sometimes there are misunderstandings. But I was wrong. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice you made to see us as threats rather than neighbors." The emotional weight of Sarah's words seemed to settle over the entire auditorium like a blanket. Even Karen's lawyer appeared uncomfortable as he whispered urgently in his client's ear. But Karen was beyond listening to reason or legal counsel. I refuse to be lectured by someone who's trying to destroy my reputation and my standing in this community. Karen snapped, her carefully maintained veneer of respectability finally cracking completely. I've lived here for 15 years. I've contributed more to this beach than any of you. And I won't be driven out by a bunch of politically correct bullies. Her outburst only reinforced everything the community had come to understand about her character. Rebecca Chen called for order and then announced the board's unanimous decision. Karen Hutchinson's membership was permanently revoked, not just from Ocean View Beach, but from all public beach facilities in the county system. The announcement was met with sustained applause. But Rebecca wasn't finished. The board had also voted to establish the Williams Family Community Service Award, recognizing annually a member family that exemplified the values of inclusion and community service that Ocean View Beach was committed to upholding. Additionally, the beach would implement mandatory anti-bias training for all staff and volunteers, establish clear protocols for handling complaints that might be motivated by discrimination, and create a community oversight committee to ensure that all members felt welcome and respected. As the meeting concluded, families lined up to apologize to the Williams family and express their support. Marcus and Zoe, who had been sitting quietly throughout the proceedings, were overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness from their community. Children who had played with them at the beach in previous years came up to hug them and invite them to upcoming birthday parties and playdates. Officer Rodriguez, who had been placed on administrative leave pending the department's investigation, approached the family with visible discomfort. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I want to personally apologize for my actions that day. I allowed the situation to escalate when I should have de-escalated it. I let my own biases cloud my judgment, and your family suffered as a result." David looked at the officer for a long moment, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. "Officer Rodriguez, I appreciate your apology. What I hope is that this experience changes how you approach similar situations in the future. Not every family will have the resources or support system to fight back the way we were able to." The officer nodded solemnly. "You're absolutely right, sir. This has been a wake-up call for me about my own assumptions and reactions. I've enrolled in additional diversity training, and I'm working with community leaders to develop better protocols for situations like this." 3 weeks later, on a crisp Saturday morning in November, the Ocean View Beach Community Association held a special ceremony to formally apologize to the Williams family and present them with the first annual Community Service Award that now bore their name. The beach was decorated with balloons and banners, and families from across the community came to show their support. Marcus and Zoe ran straight to their favorite spot near the volleyball courts, where they began construction on an elaborate sand city with the help of dozens of other children. Their laughter carried across the beach, a sound that seemed to cleanse the air of the tension and ugliness that had marked their last visit. Rebecca Chen presented the family with a beautiful plaque and announced that a portion of the beach's children's play area would be renamed the Williams Family Friendship Garden, complete with new playground equipment and a community bulletin board where families could share positive messages and organize activities. The Williams family could have chosen to leave our community after what happened to them, Rebecca told the assembled crowd. Instead, they chose to help us become better. They showed us that true community strength comes not from excluding those who seem different, but from embracing the diversity that makes us stronger. Sarah Williams accepted the award with tears in her eyes, thinking back to that horrible day when she had watched her children's innocence crumble in the face of adult prejudice. "We came here 3 years ago, looking for a place where our children could play safely and make friends. We found that. But we also found something more important. We found a community willing to examine itself honestly and commit to doing better." As the ceremony concluded, and families spread out across the beach for an afternoon of swimming and playing, David Williams found himself standing in the exact spot where Officer Rodriguez had first approached their blanket weeks earlier. But now, instead of fear and humiliation, he felt hope and belonging. Marcus ran up to him, sandy and breathless from playing tag with a group of children. "Daddy, can we come back here next weekend? Tommy Morrison wants to show me how to build a fort that won't fall down when the waves come." David smiled and ruffled his son's hair. "Of course we can, buddy. This is our beach too." The simple statement carried the weight of everything they had fought for and won. A declaration of belonging that no one could ever take away from them again. As the sun began to set over Ocean View Beach, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the Williams family packed up their belongings with the quiet satisfaction of people who had faced injustice and emerged stronger. They had not chosen to become symbols of civil rights, but they had accepted that responsibility with grace and determination. Karen Hutchinson's house, visible in the distance from the beach, sat empty with a for sale sign in the front yard. Unable to face the continued social isolation and legal challenges resulting from her actions, she had decided to relocate to another state. Her departure was met with little fanfare and no regret from the community she had claimed to be protecting. The incident at Ocean View Beach had become a case study in how communities could respond to discrimination with swift action and genuine reform. The beach's new policies had been adopted by recreational facilities across the state, and Rebecca Chen had been invited to speak at conferences about building inclusive communities. But for the Williams family, the most important outcome was not the national attention or the awards or the policy changes. It was the knowledge that their children could return to their favorite beach with confidence, surrounded by a community that had proven its commitment to justice and inclusion when it mattered most. As they walked to their car, Marcus carrying a bucket full of shells and Zoe clutching a sand dollar she had found near the water's edge, Sarah reflected on how a single moment of cruelty had been transformed into an opportunity for healing and growth. The beach behind them buzzed with the happy sounds of families enjoying their Saturday afternoon, a testament to the power of community to overcome prejudice through courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to doing what is right. The Williams family's story had become part of Ocean View Beach's history, a reminder that true community strength comes not from who we exclude, but from how we protect and embrace those who belong among us. And on this perfect autumn afternoon, with the sound of children's laughter echoing across the sand and the promise of many more beach days ahead, that lesson felt like victory enough.